I've spent the last week or so playing with the chocolate chip cookie recipe that my teacher gave me, and I think I finally found something closer to the perfectly chewy and moist cookie that I've been looking for. This recipe does contain nuts, so if you have an allergy, then you should probably just grow up and not have allergies, or you can just leave them out if you're a coward. You're going to start by toasting 1 cup of walnuts in a pan over medium-high heat, and you're just going to stir them around occasionally until they're darkened and they kind of start to smoke, like a toasted walnut. Once the walnuts are toasted, you're going to take 1/3 of a cup of sugar and melt it over medium or medium-high heat. I stir it when it starts to melt, but I don't know if that's standard practice, so just do what feels right. Once it's melted in a deep amber color, you're going to add your nuts and stir until all the nuts are covered. Then you'll just pour them out onto some prepared parchment paper and spread them out with your spatula into a thin sheet. Then once it's hardened, just break it up into small pieces and set it aside. I use my hands. You can use whatever you feel like using to break it up. Candying the nuts adds this big intense toasty flavor that kind of marbles the cookie. Then you'll want to take an amount of oats. I used 1/3 of a cup in a food processor. And then if you're really cool, you can use a spice grinder, and you're just going to grind it to the finest that you can. You'll need about 1/4 cup of that oat stuff. It's finally time to make the cookies, and you'll want to start by whisking together 400 grams of bread flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 tablespoon of kosher salt, and 1/4 cup of oat flour. Optionally, you can forget about that oat flour until after you're done filming. Then, in the bowl of a stand mixer, using the paddle attachment, you're going to mix 2 sticks of softened unsalted butter, 4 ounces of white sugar, and 1.5 cups of dark brown sugar. The dark sugar has a higher molasses content and, in my opinion, adds a deeper, roastier flavor than a light brown would. Anyway, just mix that on low until it's fully combined and you can't see any streaks of butter in there. Once that's all mixed up, add 2 large eggs and a tablespoon of vanilla extract or whatever vanilla you decide to use, and then just mix on low until fully combined. Then add that dry mixture that you just made to the bowl, making sure to spill some over the side like an idiot. Then mix on low for 2 or 3 10-second intervals. You want this to be barely combined to prevent gluten development. And between those intervals, you're going to want to scrape down the bowl so that everything gets incorporated. Then just add your candied nuts and about 2 cups of chocolate chips. I was a fool and accidentally bought the mini chips, so that's why it looks like so much. Then just cover the bowl and leave it in the fridge to rest between an hour and up to 3 days. Leaving it in for longer definitely helps for flavor development. If you have a kitchen scale, you can weigh the balls out into about 55-gram balls, or whatever size you want. And the 55-gram balls will make about a 3-inch cookie, so you'll want to set them about 2 inches apart. Cooking them for convection will take 5 minutes, and then you'll want to rotate the pan in the oven, and then do another 5 minutes. For a standard oven, just leave them in for 10 to 15 minutes. What you're really looking for is like that slight browning that you usually get on the edge of a cookie. Then just take them out and leave them on the pan to cool. Here are all of the cookies I tried to make over the past couple days. I used my baking teacher's recipe as a control because I noticed it wasn't baking quite how I'd liked. Turned to a bit of a pancake in the oven. The first variable I tried in this was bread flour, just swapping out the all-purpose, and it made what I think is a much prettier cookie. And while the texture was a lot better, in my opinion, the flavor
Mm-hmm.
really had no change. Also tried swapping egg white with an egg yolk, so increased egg yolk, and I actually really liked it. It was much more rich and fudgy in consistency.
Okay,
Close, but no
maybe
cigar.
I'll be wanna
I
maybe
tried
be looking
replacing
to try
light
that.
brown sugar with dark and replacing half of the white sugar with an equivalent of dark brown sugar. And that actually made it into the final cookie. Yeah, I really liked the flavor and texture that it got, but I still think it was a bit too flat. The last one I tried and the one that I ended up settling with had an extra 25 grams of flour in it as compared to the 375 grams. This one retained its height and has a much superior texture in my opinion, and it still has a decent crunch, but it was chewy enough for me. I don't really like the overwhelming fudginess. But please feel free to experiment with this recipe.